We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. Hey BraveCo men, this week's episode is from a teaching that I did with Danny Silk on his Kylo University. So I really hope that you enjoy it, and I will see you next week.
Jason Vallotton, he's the man. He is senior leadership team at Bethel, BraveCo, which is a men's movement that is amazing. He's oversees the transformation group at Bethel. And how I first heard about him, of course, is I had a little less exposure than the Silks and the Circles, who basically have known him his whole life. But the endorsement I got when Danny talks about Jay, he smiles. Danny loves this man. And for me, that's all I needed to know is that Danny loves him. He signed off. He's great. So I went diving in on my own, looking at BraveCo podcasts and all the stuff that Jay's doing. And I agree. He is the man. So Sarah did a good job wrangling him in here, and you got him for 2 straight sessions, 2 hours. So I'm excited for you. And excited for me because I'll be hanging out in the background too. But could all of you just give a warm Kylo University welcome to Jason Vallotton?
All right. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it makes me feel super loved. Wow, this is awesome and so much fun. I was on here, I don't know, maybe 4 months ago, maybe 5 months ago. It's hard. That's how time goes, huh? It's like, I can't remember if it was 2 weeks ago or 5 months ago. It could have been 2 years ago, but I had a really, really good time teaching, and the Q&A for me is always my favorite. So yeah, you guys feel free to ask whatever questions you want, but I do wish that we were in person because, well, it's so much easier to interact, right? And so you guys will have to do your best job at, if I'm saying something that you like, okay, let's practice now. If I'm saying something that you like, throw up some kind of emoji or heart or anything like that. Yeah. See, and there's a lot of ladies in here. Ladies do so much better at this than men. So I just have to say, I spend most of my time speaking to men, and you can't tell if a man's pissed off or if he's really excited on Zoom. So this is going to be, I am expecting that this is going to be so much better than me talking to a group of men. So, and where are all the men? I see a couple of men in here, but I think we got to go recruit some more men. So, guys, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited today. I always get brought on to talk about the worst subjects. So, the hardest subjects, right? Like, they don't bring me in to talk about the presence of God or, the gift of the Holy Spirit. They say, hey, Jay, come in and teach on forgiveness and working through pain. Yeah. So we're going to touch base on that a decent amount, and then you guys can ask whatever questions y'all may have. So, all right, here we go. In my opinion, forgiveness has been one of the most misunderstood and misused tools in the kingdom. And there's lots of reasons for that. Mostly, I think I'm going to harp on the church a little bit today. So hopefully you guys are okay with that. But I was born in the church and raised in the church. And I think when you grow up in the church, you have this idea of what forgiveness is based upon what you've been taught. And it's not all bad, but it just becomes really normal. Where I was taught to forgive was, of course, from the Bible. It says, to forgive those who have wronged you, and the same way that you want to be, that you are forgiven, you also need to forgive. And I agree with that 100%. But part of what happens in church is we get taught when to forgive and how to forgive. And and it becomes this thing where it feels really, really ineffective. For instance, forgiveness is often taught right when you get saved. And so you give your heart to the Lord and you pray the sinner's prayer, and you pray through this prayer that's really common for all of us, probably, if you're saved, which I imagine everyone here is. If you're not, I'll do an altar call at the end and you guys can give your life to the Lord. But we do this prayer at when we get saved, which is basically, Father, come and be my Lord and Savior. Uh, Forgive me for all the things that I have done wrong. I forgive those who have wronged me. Lord, would you bless them just like you're blessing me right now? Would you encounter them? Like, that's the gist of the prayer. Like, would you come and live inside of my heart, right? Come and live inside of my heart. Come and be a part of my life. I surrender my life to you. Are you guys with me? Like, that's pretty much the basic part of the prayer. Well, what happens to people is we wake up the next morning from that experience with all sorts, often, not every time. So some of you may go like, I woke up and I was addiction free. Before I said the prayer, I had an addiction. I definitely know stories like that, and I love those stories. God, how many of you figured out God can do whatever he wants to do? But typically what happens is people pray that prayer and then they start to realize a week later, I don't know that I feel much different. Not only that, what do I do about the abuse in my life? What do I do about the pain? What do I do about my husband I'm living with that's still looking at pornography, or my wife that cheated on me? Or, right, are you guys with me? Like, what do we do for that? And we go back into the cycle of like, okay, I forgive you. I forgive this person because I've been forgiven so much. And we begin to repress down our emotions. That's often what happens. We begin to repress down what we really feel, what we really think, what we really need, because I don't know how to both be saved and be forgiven of so much and have all this pain, resentment, and anger. When again, right, like if you have unforgiveness, so there's a passage in the Bible that talks about harboring unforgiveness and how the Lord releases the tormentors on people who are unwilling to forgive, right? So we have all this weird theology, not even weird, but we have all these Bible verses that we have to navigate through too. When you start thinking through, like, again, how can I hold bitterness towards a guy who took advantage of me when I have done things wrong in my life and I've been forgiven so much? So I also need to forgive even little things. And we get these phrases that forgiveness is like an onion. You just have to keep peeling it and crying and peeling it and crying, and but you never really get to the bottom of it. How many of you have felt like that before with forgiveness and pain? Is like, there really is no end to this onion that I'm peeling. I'm just peeling and it goes on and on and on. And it's just, yeah, never ending onion gobstopper type of thing. So um then we have these misconceptions as well about forgiveness. So the the misconception a lot is that, does it mean when I forgive somebody, does it mean that I have to trust them? Or does it mean that I have to forget about what happens? And so, there's all this complication around working through pain and forgiveness. And so, again, the typical thought is that we're just gonna, I'm just gonna ignore what's happened. I'm gonna ignore the past, and I'm just gonna forget about all this stuff because I don't know how to actually work through it. And the truth is, just to make it really simple, is to forgive somebody doesn't mean that you have to like them, doesn't mean you have to trust them, doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life, right? And you don't have to give them the same spot that they have. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you feel awesome about what happened to you, or what happened to somebody else. Forgiveness means that I relinquish, I let go of my need for justice, my need for revenge, for it to happen my way, and I allow God to do it His way. And I think let me say a couple more things on forgiveness because I think that it's important. Um, the challenge, I think the big challenge that we have, um, the big challenge that we have with forgiveness is that most of how we talk about it is in theory, and it's again, it's a lot of stuff. I think with the church world is that, for instance, like if I was to say to you, what do you do with your pain? Well, the average Christian, if I say, what do you do with your pain? You'd say, I give it to God. Okay. Well, how? How do you give your pain to God? What the heck does that look like? I was teaching some school of ministry students, some third year students from BSSM, and I was teaching this message. I was talking about forgiveness and working through pain. And I said, how do you work through pain and unforgiveness? And somebody said to me, well, I give it to God. I said, that's a fantastic answer. How? Well, I nail it to the cross. Pretty soon you're like, what the hell does that look like? I mean, I don't really know what we're talking about, right? Because it preaches really good from the front. I could stand at the front and say, you know what we need to do? Or you know what y'all need to do? Because I don't have any pain, right? Or unforgiveness. I don't deal with that stuff. Is y'all need to nail your pain to the cross. You need to give it to Jesus. You need to lay it down at him so that he can carry something that you can't carry. Again, it sounds awesome. How? How do I do that? I've been a marriage counselor for a lot of years, a counselor for a lot of years. When I have a married couple sitting in front of me and they're working through lots of hardships, I just tell them, you guys just need to pray more. Have you prayed together? Have you asked God to come in and be the Lord and Savior of your marriage and be the center part of? You know what? I've never done that. If I did do that, do you know what they would say to me? Yes, they've prayed. Yes, they have tried. And is God the answer? Yeah, he is 100% the answer. But how? How do you actually get to a place of real forgiveness? How do you get to a place where you've really worked through the pain? And how do we cut through all of the uh, all of the theory and make it really practical? I feel like that's been my life's goal for Christians is how do we cut through all the theory, which we need theory. I like it, but get to the real practical stuff because that's what really matters. If your feet hit the ground in the morning and you don't know what to do, well, you're still lost. You're in the same place as when you started. Actually, you're worse because you feel really hopeless and you think everyone else is able to do something that I'm not able to do. Why am I not able to forgive when everyone else is walking around perfectly fine? Or why haven't I worked through the pain when everyone else is walking around perfectly fine? You think something's wrong with you, but it's just the practical application. You're missing that practical application. We have a perfect model. And Jesus's model of forgiveness and working through pain is actually incredible. See, before Jesus went to the cross, he's in the garden. You guys will remember this. And Jesus he doesn't actually want to follow through with what he's about to do. And you'll remember this. He's in the garden and he knows like, oh, the next step of my life is getting beaten, getting bruised, getting whipped. It's tons of pain. It's going to the cross. It wasn't a secret to him what was about to happen. He knew what was about to happen. And he says this. He says, God, Father, is there any way that we can do this different? Is there any way? Do you have a plan B? Do you have an audible? And God goes, this is it, man. This is all we got. This is the pathway forward. It's interesting. Jesus says, the Bible says it was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. Well, what does that look like? I always like to play this part up in my mind because again, the Bible was written a long time ago and it can kind of seem like this far off thing. So I have this story in my mind that Jesus was sitting in the garden and he was looking at me before I was born, and he's watching me be formed and all these really cool things, right? And he's watching you and he's watching you be formed and all these really amazing things. And he has this vision and this hope for you. And then as you get born, he watches you grow in a world that's full of pain and suffering and hatred. And he watched what sin does to you, and it just completely distorts you. And he knows in that moment, oh my gosh, the only way that I could actually save my children from this suffering is to go endure it for them. And therefore, he's full of joy. He's full of gratitude because of what he gets to go do, right? He gets to go save all of us. He's on a rescue mission to rescue us from ourselves. So he does. He gets bruised and beaten and whipped, and he gets the nails driven through his legs and through his hands, and he gets put onto the cross. And while he's sitting on the cross, he's in tons of pain. While he's hanging, not sitting, while he's hanging on the cross, he's in tons of pain because you can imagine hanging there at first, like not just the nails, but your joints begin to dislocate because you can no longer hold yourself up, right? This is a very painful process, and he's dehydrating. And while he's up there, the the guards saw how much he was suffering, and they felt some sort of empathy for him, and they got a sponge and they dipped it in gall and they put it up to his lips. And it says when Jesus tasted the gall that he spit it out. This is like a key moment right here. When Jesus tasted the gall, he spit it out. Well, do you know what gall is? It's a painkiller. It's a number to numb the pain. This is really fascinating stuff. If I was on the cross, I would have taken all the painkiller that they wanted to give me so that I can go through it. But see, here's the thing. When Jesus forgave you of your sin, he wanted to be 100% present. He wanted to feel all of it, all the weight, all the pain of the sin, of your sin on him. Have you ever been around a drunk person that tells you how much they love you, but only when they're drunk, really? Or mostly when they're drunk? How authentic does that feel? If you're at a party and someone's really drunk and they say, "Man, I love you so much." You're not like, "Oh, come here," unless you're drunk. If you're drunk, then you're like, "Oh, I love you too." And you both look like a bunch of idiots, right? Everyone looks at that and goes, "That doesn't actually feel very authentic. It doesn't feel very genuine." Have you ever had somebody wrong you and either text you or call you when they're drunk and they're trying to clean up their mess with you? They're trying to say, "I'm so sorry," or, "I didn't really mean it." It doesn't actually feel genuine. See, Jesus didn't want to give you a drunk, "I forgive you." He didn't give you that. He didn't give you a drunk, "I love you." Let's see, Jesus gave you a very sober. He was in the moment. He was in the pain. Now, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, something very interesting happens. Is he has this moment that feels pretty scary, actually. He says, "Father, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me?" It's crazy because by taking on all of our sin and all of our pain, that sin became a barrier, right, between him and God, and he felt that separation. And see, when Jesus was on the cross, he was fully present, fully aware of what you have done to him, how you have wronged him, how you violated him and other people. He wasn't up there pretending like it wasn't happening. And for us as believers, one of the biggest challenges that we have is because we don't know how to do it, we don't actually really push into our pain very far. We avoid pain. We run from pain. We numb pain. We dumb down pain. I see it all the time. Somebody's going through a super hard time. How you doing, man? Doing good. Doing good. You don't look like you're doing good. Looks like both your legs aren't working and you're dragging yourself across the ground. Oh no, I'm fine. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. God's good. Well, that's amazing. I can still have a theology that God's good and be in a ton of pain. But I think most of us have so suppressed what's going on inside of us that the fear of being conscious and powerless is so overwhelming. The fear of, if I actually connect with the pain that I'm dealing with inside, it will never stop. That's one of the big lies that people believe. If I actually connect to what's going on inside of me, to my childhood, that pain will never stop. I'll just stay in it forever. But honestly, the opposite is true. Is the way that you actually really heal pain is you dive right into the middle of it. See, Matthew says, blessed are those who mourn, Matthew 5:4, for they will be comforted. Well, the opposite's also true, right? Cursed are those who don't mourn, because there's no comfort. See, if you want the comfort of God, you have to mourn. You actually have to mourn. You have to work through what's gone, the wrongs, the pain, the hurt that's gone on inside of you. And until you do that, there's no real comfort from the pain. There's only suffering. And the real you gets suppressed, and your desires, your needs, your cares, those things get suppressed. And what comes to the surface is the survivor, man. That scrappy old survivor. That's the pain of trauma is, well, trauma is every age you've ever been. You are every age you've ever been. So you don't outgrow trauma. You work through trauma. You don't outgrow it. It becomes, you begin to shut off parts of you in order to cope with what's really going on inside. So again, we live in a culture that is just full of medication. And I'm no, I'm not preaching to you guys. This is my story. This is stuff that I work through. Yeah. So, okay, what do we do now? What I want to do is give you guys a 5-step process for dealing with pain. And I'll go through it as quickly as I can. The most important thing is to change the way that you see pain. Because until we change the way that we see pain, we'll constantly be avoiding it and running from it. But you have to change the way that you see pain. So when I was working through my divorce, well, I should say this. I got divorced in 2007. My wife was having an affair, and she left me and the kids and went and moved in with that other person, ended up having that affair. And so I became a single dad overnight. Now, if you know anything about divorce, and if you've had that, something like that happen to you, whether you've been the one that's left or whatever, I'm not pointing blame. What you know is that all the happy memories in your life now become super painful. Some of you, this was your parents, right? You were in a home, being raised in a home, mom and dad got a divorce. Now, all the happy moments are just painful moments, right? So you have these thousands of painful moments and memories trapped inside of you. What the heck do you do with those? What I started to learn while I was working through my divorce through pain, where I learned this process, is that every painful memory, every painful thing that I worked through was a gift, because that's actually where I got my need met in a healthy way. And we're going to talk about this. But we have to change the way that we see pain, because if you don't change the way that you see pain, then you just run from it forever. So step one is you have to actually acknowledge that you're in pain. You have to acknowledge that you're in pain. And this can be really hard because, again, we get so used to coping that we pretend like it doesn't hurt anymore. I talk to a lot of men. I've had a lot of men say, I don't never really affected me that I don't have a dad, that he is not around. I don't really feel anything. It's like you don't feel anything because you shut it off. Because you actually shut off the thing that says, wow, somebody abandoned you. Somebody left you. Somebody was selfish. Somebody chose another life over you. That naturally, all on its own, to be rejected, to not feel wanted, to not have someone there to play with you, to have somebody, that's a super freaking painful thing. You have to shut that off or process through it to get to the other side of that. So acknowledging the pain is the first step, because you can't work through anything that you don't actually admit that you have. So step one. Step two is to process one thought. See, oftentimes people will start the journey of processing pain, but it becomes very ineffective because they try to process everything at once. It's like try to eat all the meals for the week in one day. You just can't do it. So, what you want to do is take one thought, one memory, one moment. Now, let me caveat this by saying there's a lot of things that you've already worked through in the past. You're not trying to drum up old stuff, right? You're trying to take the stuff that's actually really there. So for me, it was really easy in my divorce. I would have a memory that popped into my mind that was really painful. Instead of suppressing that, instead of going and finding something else fun to do, or instead of eating till I felt better, if I had time, I would go in my room, and this is what I recommend. Some version of this. I'd go in my room. I would put on music that matched my mood, right? Not worship music. Put on music that matched my mood. I feel sad. I feel down. In a hard moment. I'd open up my journal. I would date it, um, title it, and then I would start writing. And I would write out what's going on. People often say, I don't know where to start. And it's like, start with that. I don't know where to start, but I'm sitting here in a ton of pain from this memory that I'm having. I remember when, and start to describe what's going on inside of you. That's the beginning of a conversation, right? And you're just having a conversation with yourself. You're literally just starting to process what's going on inside of you. I love the journal because you can have a really detailed conversation, and then you can also go back and read it if you want to, and share that experience. And so that's a really great way to begin to process it. A couple of things that are really important: don't sugarcoat it. So again, uh, we're trying not to hurt anybody's feelings, So we just say things like, Dad, was such a bummer when such a bummer when you left and didn't ever come back home. Like, I just feel so frustrated about that. It doesn't actually match the level, right? Hmm. Was I felt so sad when I was molested as a kid. It's like, mm, those the emotion, that level of anger doesn't actually match what happened to you. So what you're going to have to do is get comfortable with diving into your real feelings, right? You're going to have to get comfortable expressing how that really felt. And so it's not what you say when you're journaling isn't a commentary on your character, it's a commentary on the pain. I am in so much pain right now. Now, do you have to use cuss words? You don't have to use cuss words. It doesn't matter to me what you do, but you have to, you got to really connect with what's going on inside of you. That's the whole point, right? You got to really connect with what's going on inside of you. And you may say, I freaking hate you. I never want to see you again. I wish you were dead. Do you really, are you really wishing they're dead? Probably not. You're just expressing how much pain you're in. And you want to be able to do that. Or again, you're just brushing over the surface of it and not really diving deep down into it. Um, what's going to happen? Step 3 is define the theme. What's going to happen is as you begin to process the pain, you're going to find that there's a theme over and over and over again. And this is the key. I'll give you one. I remember I use this a lot. I remember when uh, the first time after my wife had left, the first time I had thought about our wedding day. That becomes a really painful day, right? I was in school of ministry. There was worship going on, and I was just laying on stage by the artists who were painting. I was laying down there, and I wasn't trying to think about it. It just popped into my mind. And I was watching my wife walk down the aisle, and I was crying. And the closer she got, the more I was crying. And I realized, you know how you have two things going on at once? I realized worship's about to end and I'm bawling. I should probably fix that. So I put my hat down, I jump up, I go off stage, I go upstairs in my office, I turn off the lights, open up my computer, put on sad music, open up my journal, title it, and I start to type. All I'm typing is the memory. I'm watching her. And then I've got a whole bunch of accusation. How could you? Right? How could you do this? Why would you why would you come in and take my innocence? Who's going to love me? Who's going to want somebody who, was left? And I've got all this thing. I just need to get out these things that are inside of me. And at first, what you have is you have the surface level just anger. F you, how dare you, how could you? And most people stay there forever. That's the onion because they don't dive deeper. They don't find what's actually driving the pain. So it's just all accusational. F you, I hate you, how dare you? And you go eat a donut and you feel better for a little bit. And then you dive back into F you, I hate you, how dare you? Right? That's the cycle. But what's actually really going on is you have unmet needs going on inside of you. Your pain is unmet needs. That actually, if the person came back, if you were raped and the person came back and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. That was selfish. That was really painful for you. That was, I'm going to go serve prison time." Does that actually take away your pain? Does that make it better? Doesn't make it better. Now, that may be nice. And it's great when somebody says sorry, but that doesn't actually fix what's the unmet need now. If you were raped, what's the unmet need? Well, now I feel super unsafe, don't I? Am I going to be taken advantage of again? And how do I heal that memory of being taken advantage of and forced? And I know I'm using something graphic, but I'm using it for a purpose. You have this unmet need. It's no longer just about the person. Now I'm angry that this person introduced this level of insecurity, this level of anxiety, this that took my innocence, whatever. I have a bunch of anger towards them, but they can't actually solve. This has to be solved at a much deeper God level. But you don't solve it through theory either. Are you guys, I hope I'm walking you into what's happened in your life. So here's what's happening is I start to see a theme. Who's going to want me? Am I not lovable? Why couldn't you love me? What could I not, what could he give you that I couldn't give you? Was I not enough? I'm starting to really see my insecurities, aren't I? Who's going to love me? Who's going to want me? Was I not enough? Did he give you something more than what I could give you? That's the thing that only God can answer. She can't answer that for me. Only he can answer that for me. Now, what's incredible is once I have gotten the pain out, once I process and I've gotten all the F you, I hate you, you're evil, how dare you out, I'm into a completely different place of listening and hearing and connecting, which is important. And you'll see this with kids, right? If your kids are super angry, can they hear you? They can't hear you. So when they're screaming, when they're angry, and you're like, hey, it's not okay to talk that way. Hey, that makes me feel really sad. They're like, blah. It's just making them even worse, right? Once they've processed all that and they come down, now they're in a different place to hear, aren't they? Oh, they can start to pay attention. That's what happens to us. So that piece right there, that's step 4. Step 4 is take this thing to God. So this is where we get out of theory mode and very practical. Lord, who's going to love me? Who's going to want me? Or am I really safe? Because I felt pretty unsafe when I was taken advantage of. Or what are you going to do for my kids? Like, I don't know. Like, this is where you start to talk to God about what are you going to do? Because I'm holding my need right here. I've got it in my hand. I've got this thing. I've identified it. This is what I really need an answer for that no one else can give me. And I begin to talk to him about that. See, what's going to happen is you're going to get an answer. He's going to go, it's this right here, son, or this right here, daughter, or however he talks to you. Jay, I want to show you something that happened. See, once he gives you an answer for the thing that you really need, it's like 1,000 pounds come off your shoulder and you're like, oh, it's relief. And sometimes it's just a promise. Like I remember processing through, I was so angry. Again, one of these 100 moments, I had hundreds of moments where I'd process through my pain. And one of them was just fear of my kid's future. I'm so terrified, right? I have so much anger towards all this pain that's induced in my kids that I can't stop. I can't change it. I can't fix it. And now they're going to deal with something that I don't know how to fix that. What do I need? And she can't fix it. She can go, oh, I'm so sorry. Wish I wouldn't have done that. But that doesn't change the pain that they're in. Now I need a promise from God. And I remember specific times when I'd sit with God and he would process through, son, this is what I'm going to do with your kids. And again, it takes the pressure off me and puts him back in my God spot. So from here is where we move to step 5. Step 5 is I'm going to find compassion. So let me give you guys a little principle. Forgiveness without compassion is almost fruitless. It doesn't work. This is why people, again, say it's like an onion that you have to keep peeling over and over and over again. Well, the opposite of compassion is judgment. And if you say, I forgive you, but you don't have compassion in your heart for the person, you have judgment in there, which isn't necessarily the wrong thing to have. I mean, if someone really wronged you, like I've got some judgment towards them. I've got some real pain. Hard to have compassion for somebody who's left you, who didn't show up for you, who abandoned you, which also, by the way, may be you. You may have abandoned you. You may have not shown up for you. And that's why it's so hard to forgive yourself. But forgiveness without compassion, we just get back into this looping, I forgive you. Well, if you're not doing it from a place of compassion, you'll just end up back at judgment again. And judgment, you're going to go back around the unforgiveness. Somebody once said unforgiveness is like drinking poison, thinking that you're going to kill the other person, but it's really only killing you. Well, we stay in unforgiveness not because we want to, but because we think it's our only pathway to justice. I remember when God told me there's no justice in a broken life, because I was telling him, I want justice. That's what I want. I want justice. I want my ex-wife to pay. I want this guy to pay. I want justice. And God, I was sitting on the edge of my bed and he said, there's no justice in a broken life. How does her life breaking down, how does that actually get real justice? Because my kids are going to pay for that, right? She's still their mom. And how does him, that guy, how does him ruining his life actually solve anything? Well, his kids are going to pay for that. And so is he. So he showed me like the only real justice is if this thing gets really reconciled. If what he paid for on the cross happens. So step 4, once I get my need met, I'm in a totally different place. I feel different. I've got a promise. God met me. Now I want to see, Lord, how do you see him? How do you see her? I want to get activated to compassion. And he'll show you something. He'll show you them through his eyes. Now what you're going to do is remember when you started processing in the very beginning and you started just to write down all the stuff that was coming out, the F you, I hate you, you're horrible, how could you? You're going to go back through that. And from a place of compassion, you're going to forgive them. I forgive you for being selfish. I forgive you for not showing up for me. I forgive you for meeting your needs first. I forgive you, right? And you're turning over those rocks. Forgiveness is a very thorough process. It's not a blanket that you throw over your entire life, which is a lot of what we get taught when we first get saved. Take this blanket of forgiveness, throw it over your whole entire life, and hope that when you lift it up later, that everything hasn't grown and gotten angry. Forgiveness is not a blanket. It's a process where I willfully choose to look at all these pieces like God did. He looked at everything in your life and he said, I forgive you for that. I forgive you of this one too. I'm not drunk. I'm not pretending. I'm not excusing. I'm looking you in the eyes and saying, I forgive you. I know. I know. You messed up. I understand it. I don't even need your apology. I forgive you. That's the space that we want to get to, right? That's the spot that we want to get to is my forgiveness is not dependent upon your apology. My forgiveness is not dependent upon what you do. I got this. I got this because I know how to connect to the guy who's not bound by time, who's not bound by circumstance, but he can go back in time. He can go back into whatever circumstance, and he can make all things new. He can right or wrong. So for me, that's the new model. And again, I have people every time that say, I got saved and I had this crazy addiction, or I got saved and I had all this pain, rage and anger and hate towards my dad, and it's gone. And what I always tell them is thank freaking God, because that's a lot to work through. But we know that life is tough. So you'll need a process at some point. You'll need a process. Otherwise, you're back to being afraid. right? You're back to being afraid of pain. You're back to every time you feel pain, you just try to avoid it. And so what we want to do is we want to learn a process so that we're not afraid of pain, so that we can valiantly walk through it and work all the way through it. So cool. I'm going to spend the second half of our time together answering questions.
But yes, this would be a great spot for a 5-minute break, and then we'll come bring it on back.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.